Great. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us for our latest professional showcase featuring Fusion Academy. I'm so pleased to welcome Margaret Gregory and Elizabeth Sorensen from Fusion to this presentation today. My name is Christine Lai, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Special Education Legal Fund. For those of you who don't know SELF, Special Education Legal Fund is a nonprofit organization headquartered in Connecticut that provides resources and support to families in need with children in the special education system, primarily through a grants program called the Legal Assistance Program that provides grants of up to $5,000 to families in need who have the need of a qualified special education attorney to assist them in their advocacy process. I have had the great privilege of experiencing the Fusion Academy model several times for two of my children with very different learning needs. For my oldest, Fusion was a lifesaver for us when the school that he was attending had to close unexpectedly in January of 2020, just 2 months before the pandemic, due to unforeseen financial issues. Because my family wanted time to evaluate appropriate options before selecting another school, I should say, we decided that Fusion's individualized learning program would allow him to finish his freshman year of high school with a minimal amount of disruption while we looked for more permanent placement. When the pandemic caused school closures in March of that year, his pandemic learning experience with Fusion didn't change hardly at all from the in-person model, and Fusion did an amazing job of fostering community and friendship between the students of that community. Fusion's flexible and individualized model has also enabled my children to pursue individualized learning opportunities that were not available to them at their current schools. One of my children was able to complete an 80-page novelette through a customized summer writing program with Maggie Gregory specifically. And my other child has been able to continue his study of a language he is deeply invested in, but is no longer offered at his high school. So welcome Fusion this afternoon, and I'll turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Christine. Maggie and I are really excited to talk today and meet you all and share a little bit about Fusion. So my name is Elizabeth Sorensen. I'm the Director of Outreach for Fusion in this area. So I work with our 3 campuses, so 2 campuses in Connecticut, Greenwich and Fairfield, and also our Westchester campus in White Plains, New York. So thanks so much for being here, and looking forward to also your questions and learning more from you all. So this is a little overview about who we are, sort of high level overview, right? So Fusion Academy is fully accredited for middle school and high school programming. And we really specialize in an individual and customized education experience for each student. So, really most important to us is that we're building that individual plan for each student and family, but also that we're helping our students in skill building and fostering skills in, the things that we have mentioned there: independent critical thinking, being resourceful, compassionate, and emotionally secure, right? So all of the pieces and components of our program together really work together to help students towards these goals. Another thing that is also really important to us is collaboration, right? So this is, of course, collaboration with the student and their family, but also other schools that we work with, any professionals in the community that they work with, and really all working together to make sure that, again, we're building skills, we're building goals for the student, and really utilizing that true sense of collaboration and working together. So we have one of our students from our Greenwich campus, Ari, and just a very short video, a little bit about her story in her own words. So if you'll bear with me a second.
My name's Ariana Puya, and I'm a student here at Fusion Academy. So I came from a high school in Westport, Connecticut, and for me the main thing was the school setting. It was very hard to focus and get that individual one-on-one time with my teachers, and so I was always falling behind and I didn't have the attention that I needed. That's what really brought me to Fusion, was because I knew that coming to Fusion I was going to get that special attention that I needed to allow me to excel, and it it gave me a confidence as well. Every student here knows each other. You still have the cafes at lunch where everyone is sitting together, everyone sees each other's faces. You're talking to each other before you go to your class. No one can just drift off to the corner. No one can hide, in their classroom, even though it may seem like that because it's just one person and one teacher, but that doesn't happen here, which I love. You feel comfortable enough to come out of your shell in that sense. I'm president of the National Honor Society, and I've been president for 2 years. It's not just a confidence in myself and my work, it's with every relationship that I have, inside and outside of Fusion. So for example, when I go off to college and I have to speak to professors and adults, that's something that a lot of kids are kind of nervous, you get anxiety about talking to adults, but because I'm so used to it here at Fusion, and I'm so used to talking about film and things that I like, I'm not afraid to do that with other adults in the professional world, and that's a huge factor. I'm now going to be studying screenwriting at NYU Tisch. I was able to take multiple courses here at Fusion, screenwriting, film directing, documentary production, documentary studies, so all types of things in the film realm. It just encouraged me to keep pursuing it, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Any films that I made, any screenplays I wrote, there was always a teacher to check my work, to help me, to make suggestions, to recommend schools and other programs, and so I had that drive. I would not be where I am today, and that's thanks to Fusion.
All right, I will pass it along to Maggie now.
Thanks, Liz. I love that video. That's one of my favorites. I know I shouldn't say that, but a couple of them in here are some of my favorites, including Christine's kiddos. So, but the stories, it's what attracted me to Fusion. So I've been with Fusion for 10 years. I'm Maggie Gregory. I'm the area head of school for Greenwich and Westchester. And what that means is I oversee the initial meetings with families. So I build that plan with them right from the beginning. I listen to their stories. I match them with the right teachers so that we can really hone in on a personalized learning approach. And it's initially what attracted me to Fusion. When I started 10 years ago, I actually started as a teacher and then moved into the head of department head role and then the head of school role. And I've been a head of school for 8 years. But that personalized learning and being able to have autonomy in the classroom to make modifications, to connect with your students, to be a mentor is really what initially drew me to Fusion. Liz, if you could switch to the next slide. So what does the power of one-to-one look like? We teach to the student and not to the class. We have our objectives, we have our standards that we have to meet to issue the credit, but we're personalizing the experience. We're taking into account who the person is, and how best to serve the student and teach this material to them. We tailor to their interests. We also tailor to their learning preferences and profiles. So when a student initially comes in, if they have an IEP, if they have a neuropsych, if they have ed testing, anything that they come in with, we review. We also do additional informal testing. We'll use our MAP measures of academic progress and our Mindprint assessment to measure content and also how a student takes in information. We'll interpret that to make sure that we are tailoring the program to the student in front of us. With that said, we do teach at 3 levels. So within high school, we have our essential track, college prep, and honors. We can be flexible with those 3 options too. So if you're a really strong math student and want to take an honors level math and science course, but when it comes to English, we really need to slow down and keep it out of college prep, we can mix and match those as well. Courses are taught until they're mastered. So mastery at Fusion is a 70. We won't move a student on even within the semester from unit to unit until they've reached that 70. And that means that we're slowing down the material. We're reinforcing, we're revisiting topics that maybe they haven't reached that 70 on. So we're not moving them from unit to unit until they reach that mastery, but we're also not moving them on from semester to semester or year to year. We're making sure that our students really understand the content that's being taught to them. We do have open enrollment, so we are enrolling all throughout the year. We're open all year round. We see students over the summer. We see students in the more traditional September to June. Really depends on the student that you have in front of you. And what their timeline looks like, if they want to speed up classes, if they want to slow down. We do see students that come to us with anxiety that maybe a full course load is not the appropriate way to plan a program for the student. Maybe we want to slow down and do less courses throughout the year. Maybe they have a year-round program because that's what works best for them. And then, of course, our customized scheduling, which is essential to the Fusion program. Not every student functions at 7:30 in the morning. It's just not appropriate for all students. So we will make modifications to the schedule that maybe they have a later start. Maybe they start at 10:30 because they don't sleep well at night, or they need time to wake up and eat, or maybe mom and dad's schedule just don't align with the 7:30 drop off. Being able to customize not just for the student, but also the entire family around scheduling. So our students, you got to see one of them. You've heard a little bit about Christine's children as well. Who do we serve? And there's really no one perfect answer. We really serve a wide range of students. But in general, who attend Fusion, students who want to go further in their education with individualized attention. Maybe the classroom can be too overwhelming, or there's too many distractions, or they're too afraid to ask questions in a large classroom. They want that individualized attention so that they can be advocates for themselves. They can go further into material. They can move faster or slower through material because it's catered to them. Students who aren't excelling in a traditional school and need extra support, that's very vague because students could be struggling for all different reasons. Students could be struggling for a portion of time. We saw a number of students that came to us during the pandemic because we had excelled at offering remote classes where other schools were really just catching up. They'd never done something like that before, but because we've been flexible, we've been able to accommodate that years before. So being able to help those families that are not excelling at that time, maybe it's just for a short time period, maybe it's for their entire high school career. But not excelling could be all different things. Students that struggle with anxiety, depression, ADHD, slow processing, maybe they have some social issues, or they're missing social cues in a large setting. We want to shrink it down, kind of move through those situations more intentionally and help them grow from them. Students who benefit from individualized scheduling. So we see a number of athletes that will come to us and be able to travel for their tournaments or competitions. We work on an A-day, B-day schedule. So not that A through J anymore, where it's constantly rotating. You don't know what's what day, and we miss that after school day, and none of that. So we do A-days, which are Monday, Wednesday, B-days that are Tuesday, Thursdays, and then Fridays are flexible. So some students have class on Fridays, but it is optional. So for students that are undergoing treatments for anxiety, if they have illnesses, if they're athletes that maybe have had concussions and now need physical therapy or need some time to kind of scale back, they can use that Friday for themselves. So being able to schedule in a way that's going to benefit them. Students that struggle with anxiety or social challenges need a safe place to be themselves. Our community is very intentional. It is small by nature to make sure that our staff can pay attention to all of the students, that we can actually uphold our mission to get to know all of our students in an intentional way and have healthy mentoring relationships, and especially with students that have social challenges, to not have them feel like they're being embarrassed, to not have them feel like they're being penalized for something they said, but help them connect with somebody that understands them and talk them through it makes all of the difference. And lastly, students with creative abilities in the fine arts. As you heard from Ari's story, she went on to NYU in screenwriting and film production. She's a junior there right now and doing really well. But because we were in the one-to-one, she was able to go so much further. She was really able to develop her portfolio. Now, she's one of those students that knew what she wanted to do early on. Of course, not all students know that in the 9th or 10th grade. They don't come in and know exactly what they want to do. But for those students that do, we can really harness that. And for those students that don't, you can also treat it like a liberal arts experience at Fusion. You can try many things and get to know who you are and where you might like to go from there.
Thanks, Maggie. I'll take over for a bit. So there's so many program options at Fusion. And again, being able to create a customized educational experience for each student and family can look like a lot of things. So just want to share with you a little bit of an overview about what that can look like. So this is sort of high level overview, and then I'll share some sort of specifics about what we can build for each student. So Fusion Academy nationwide has over 250 courses, and the curriculum for students of a wide range of topics and interest. It's a question we get a lot: what classes, what options are there? And we can be really creative in helping students hone in on some of their interests. Sort of aside from the core academics, of course, there's lots of options there, but also in the electives and in options and languages, as Christine mentioned, like what are some of the other options that students can take? We're fully accredited through Cognia, Middle States, and NEOSC. So, obviously wanted to share that. And also here, as Maggie mentioned earlier, we have the 3 tracks: the essential, college prep, and honors track, and we can help, a family plan for what's going to be most appropriate for their student. This is a little bit of an overview around what I mentioned, right? So there's many different access points to Fusion depending on what the student wants or needs, right? So sort of first and foremost, in terms of the majority of our students, we're a full-time middle and high school option for students, right? Maggie mentioned we have rolling admissions, right? So students can enter Fusion at any point in the school year, at any point in the year, in the calendar year, and begin classes, right? So the beauty of that is we can really hone in and pick up exactly where they left off, not just in their learning, but also with their credits, and make sure that we're helping to build a plan to help them either catch up or move forward, and build a plan together. We also offer classes for credit, so students can come and just take one class at Fusion, right? And that can be during the school year, it can be during a medical leave, it could be over the summer, right? To advance to the next level of a course, to retake a class, lots of options there. So take the credit with Fusion and bring the transcript with you. Elsewhere, if that's the goal. We also offer tutoring and mentoring, right? So that's, across the board in all of our subjects, but also in skill building, right? So it can be core academic subjects, it could be elective subjects that are something for enrichment, for fun, could be, for executive functioning skills. There could be an entire plan built around supplemental support for a student. One of the very special things about Fusion that a lot of people will mention is this homework cafe space. What is the homework cafe, right? So one of the biggest questions we get at Fusion is, what does the day look like? How do students interact with each other? How does one-to-one sort of translate into then also being able to collaborate, socialize with their peers? So a full-time student's day is built around one-to-one classes with each of their teachers for different subjects. And then following each class, a period of time in what we call our homework cafe space, which are essentially common spaces for students. And the goal is to complete their homework for their core academic classes, but also be in these spaces to collaborate, to socialize, to participate with each other throughout their day as well. There's a homework cafe director and teacher there available to lend support and guidance, and typically will also oversee, the social programming at each campus as well. It's a really important space. There's a break in the middle of the day for all of the students for an hour. It's an amazing time for students to socialize, participate in clubs and activities. And we mentioned that down at the bottom there. There's clubs, there's activities. You heard Ari talk about her National Honor Society, right? There's all these different options that are offered and are also student curated, right? Like we allow the students to use their own creativity and interest to bring ideas, field trips, club ideas to the school. Again, Maggie mentioned we're small. We want to make sure that we are focusing in on what each student is passionate about and what's going to drive them to want to socialize and share these things with their peers. A few more options, as we mentioned here, test prep options, post-secondary counseling, right? So all of our students have the option to work with our College of Post-Secondary Counselor to really plan out what life looks like after graduation and, prepping for college or a gap year program or vocational program or whatever the next steps may be. Maggie will talk a little bit more about that in an upcoming slide as well. Social emotional learning support, homework support, of course, right? That's a huge piece of Fusion, is that all homework is done in the homework cafe as part of their school day. So I'll say it again because it sort of like bears repeating. all of the core academic homework that a student has during their school day is done during those homework cafe hours, and they're not bringing it home with them. So if they need to sort of revisit it in the next session, right, or the next homework cafe period, that's fine. Like we can, as Maggie said, we can go at their pace and their teacher can support them through that process, but they're not bringing that homework home. So it really leaves that time at the end of the day with a sense of completion of their school day, and also leaves the rest of the day for them, right, to relax, to have time with family, to do an activity, to do other things, and not have to have the stress of, the hours of homework hanging over their head, which, as you can imagine, can help a wide variety of different types of students. And finally, clubs, social activities, field trips, as I mentioned before. Lots to talk about there. Happy to also at the end, we have a spot for questions, but there's so much engagement and community that's built around the students really having a sense of belonging with each other, with feeling like it's their community. And if you ever have a chance to talk to a Fusion student, a lot of them will really describe it that way, like that it's their space, it's their community, right? It's very much, they take a lot of pride and ownership in the community. I'll pass it to Maggie.
Thanks, Liz. So when a family comes in to meet with me or I'm talking with a professional, I mainly get a three or four questions, and one is almost always about the socialization. So as Liz was saying there, the one-to-one is just for learning. That's just in the classroom, but then it is paired with really intentional time to really promote healthy socialization. When they're in a large classroom, they shouldn't be socializing at that time anyway. Obviously, they're learning to coexist around peers, to work together, but within the homework cafe, we're really overseeing it and really able to initiate those conversations in a really healthy way. The second question I get is, where do your students go? How do you set them up for success? It's one-to-one. Isn't that kind of hand-holding? Aren't you walking them around? And the feedback that we've gotten from our alumni over the past 12 years has actually been that we've prepared them more intentionally for them to learn, that they are in control and that they can ask questions and they can set up office hours. And like Ari said in the beginning, she's been talking with adults for so long, she's not afraid of her professor. She's able to have a mature conversation. So most of our students, so from our Greenwich and Westchester campus, 93% of them move on to four-year universities. Some examples here from the past couple of years, multiple students have gone on to Bard, NYU, Indiana University, University of New Haven, Manhattanville, Marist. We see Fairfield, UConn, Quinnipiac, really widespread, but the goal is always to get really in touch with who the student is. As we said, right from the beginning of the planning, we're really intentional with teacher pairings, but we're also intentional with those post-secondary counselors, even in the name, post-secondary, not college counselor, not guidance counselor, post-secondary, after high school. What are we looking at? For some students, that's a four-year college. For other students, we need to move a little bit slower. Maybe it's a gap year, maybe it's a post-grad year, maybe it's community college, a dual enrollment. Maybe they're going right out into the workforce to get some experience or travel first. We want to make sure there's always a plan. So the other 7% of our students that don't go on to those four-year universities, or maybe defer, and then during that year that they've deferred, we'll do an internship or go into the workforce, vocational or trade school, gap year, community colleges, really making sure that we're getting in touch with what the student needs, wants, and to set them up appropriately for success. So that's really how we take the after high school, what we're looking at there. And then lastly, we will take a look at a Westchester student. This is going to be Gia's story.
Give me a second here. As a side note, I remember when Gia started at the Westchester campus, and I almost cried when I watched this video the other day. I can't remember when it was made, but I didn't get a chance to see it until recently, and it's incredible. So I'm excited for you guys to watch it. Sorry, one moment.
This is Gia Cicero. I'm a senior at Fusion Academy. Public school wasn't really working out for me. I struggled with ADD, and they weren't really giving me accommodations like they promised. So we found Fusion and we decided to give it a try. I'm sitting here doing an interview, which I never would have done, I think, even last year. Your classes and your education is tailored to you since you're the only student in the classrooms. I think it's a great way, at least for me, to learn because there's more support that way. I think I wound up getting a much better education because it was tailored to me. It was meant to challenge me specifically. I just think that would be good for any student, whereas in a public classroom, not everyone is on the same level. So I think it's really important for that. For me personally, I like having more of a relationship with my teacher. I just think it makes for a better experience in the classroom overall. I like having that deeper connection with my teachers. I think it's a great way to learn. I race go-karts. We recently started racing at a national level, and it's been a lot better. Not only then am I not having to deal with being left behind and being behind on assignments and homework, but I like that better because it helps me to just focus on the event while I'm there and I've put all of my energy into just racing. Of course, that's very important to me. Overall, I really enjoyed being able to grow on a more personal level. This environment in particular has really helped me to do that. Helping to better myself in whatever ways I want to. Like the support that I've had from the school is something that's been really important to me and to get to where I am now.
So I supported, as I mentioned, I've been with Fusion for about 9 years, and I started at our Westchester campus, and now I support 3 campuses for doing outreach. But I did admissions for a really long time, and I specifically remember talking to Gia and her dad when they were like first inquiring, and just like seeing the growth and seeing this graduation, the pieces of, the video, it's just incredible. And you all know, you all work with students and get to see the growth, but glad we got a chance to share it with you all.
Thank you. I mean, those stories were really beautiful. I'm sorry to interrupt. I am so thankful that you shared both of those stories because, I think it really, really summarizes the breadth of the Fusion student experience. And, because, we are Special Education Legal Fund, I would love it. I'd love to throw the first question out there. How can the Fusion model be adapted to serve students with special education needs?
I can take that one, Liz. So right from the initial meeting, when a family is talking with me, I ask them to be as open as possible about any needs, any areas that we can support in, and also with any paperwork. So if there is testing, right from the beginning, things that we can get in, and a student's so much more than just the paper that's written about them, how they present in that way, and the tests that they have. So it's an ongoing process of us getting to know them, but that's really helpful in the beginning for us to have a starting point. We have a special education lead on all of our campuses that goes through all of the paperwork. And they break down for the teachers that don't come from a background of special education, how to work with this student. So we do regular PDs for our staff when we are reevaluating throughout the year the profiles that we're seeing. So we see a tremendous amount of ADHD, ADD, anxiety, dyslexia. So we see a lot of those common profiles. So all of our teachers have a good basis understanding, if not an expertise in those fields. But any teacher that needs help with lesson planning, or if something's just not sticking for a student, reminding to go back, and sometimes you have to reevaluate your lesson plans too, and really take a closer look to see why it might not be landing. Bring in a special education lead to observe a class, to go through lesson plans with you to modify. And I think with us, our specialty for students that have either diagnosed learning disabilities or differences is that fluidity, that willingness to change the plan, that it's not always going to go like this, that we need to modify, and reminding us and the students that that's okay, that everyone's learning profile is different, and how can we access the roadmap so that you can understand the best way to learn? How are you going to learn so that when you leave, you can support yourself, you can ask for what you need. So a lot of the process starts from that initial meeting, but then constant revision throughout their time with us at Fusion.
That's a great, thank you so much for expanding on that. I know that you guys also have, executive functioning classes that you offer to your students. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that kind of is incorporated into, can be incorporated into a Fusion program?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will start to see warning signs. One, initially, a lot of families will come in and say that students do need support with executive functioning. So we do have 2 tailored classes, one that is specifically executive functioning, and it covers the entire spectrum. And then one is more study skills, and not to be, we don't want to mistake those two, right? Because executive functioning is not just organizing, right? Whereas if a student needs help organizing or studying or preparing, we might enroll them in study skills versus executive functioning. When we go into executive functioning, we really want to help the student understand their profile to then build a toolkit to help them be successful. So when we are looking at that, we'll pick up if we haven't enrolled a student in executive functioning or study skills right from the beginning, maybe there's something underlying that we haven't discovered yet. We will discover it through the Homework Cafe. So as we mentioned before, the students are out there completing their own work, and we have a director of Homework Cafe and Homework Cafe teachers out there to support them. But if we're really seeing that the student can initiate, that they can't start their work, or they can't get through their work, or if we're starting to see these warning signs of executive functioning deficits, then we'll enroll them in that course. Like I said, it is fluid at Fusion, that if we see a student needs more or is being really successful and we want to challenge them more, we can constantly make those modifications. So yes, we absolutely have executive functioning courses. Then we also have tutoring support too. So if your child's not with us full time and they just need additional support, built into the tutoring is that executive functioning piece as well. So if your child's at a traditional day school and then comes to us after or over the summer, we can really focus in on those skills. One thing that we see pretty frequently over the summer too is, students are assigned summer reading or math packets, and they're just expected to do it, or you're expected to sit down with them and go through this, and it becomes cumbersome for the family, where you don't want that relationship. You don't want to fight with your child about doing work, or you don't understand why they're not understanding this. And tagging us in to help them go through that, remediate it, and kind of take that off your plate is also one of our specialties and an area to focus on those executive functioning skills as well.
Wonderful. I have a question from a participant. The question is, if a student is not in a specific or class or program to begin with, can you talk about how tuition rates can get adjusted or taken into consideration in Connors cases, tuition cases?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding in.
Allie, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so sorry. So let's say the student comes in and the parent hasn't, let's say the parent hasn't brought up EF issues, or you guys put them in a 9th or 10th grade curriculum, but then it turns out, hey, they really do need the study skills class. Hey, they really need XYZ that you guys offer, but didn't put it in, the initial tuition plan. But now they need that class. And so, tuition might be adjusted. How does that work if a tuition rate has already been sent in? Things like, how does that, come into play, and how do you guys deal with those issues?
In a direct placement type of situation.
Exactly. Right. Let's say it's like an Ossining or Scarsdale's case, but it's, let's Ossining, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, let's say it's a Connors case, right? The parent is not able to pay up front, but you're trying to adjust it to make it really specific to them. But that tuition rate's already been sent in and
approved by the district, right?
Yeah, but now it's X plus ABC.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So that's starting with that initial meeting is that I really try to get as familiar as possible with what services they had prior, what was already given to them, either by the district or their traditional school. I'll ask how that was going, what was beneficial. We really try to dig out as much as possible up front. I'll also go through the IEPs, the neuropsych, and I'll look at the recommendations. And if the recommendations or the goals say that there are certain services that the child should have that's close to something that we offer, I will present that in the plan to the district. So I will say, the student does need executive functioning support or social emotional support. We have a course called Community Minds that really digs into helping students get to know themselves in social thinking series. So I will put that on the course list of this would be an appropriate placement. I do also kind of overestimate. I will put in some tutoring packages as well if I have a concern that the student will move slower through the material. based on what I'm seeing in the learning profile that's being presented. So I'll buffer that in too, because I would never want the parents that can't afford, additional sessions to the semester or additional time to fall on them when it's just because the child needs to move slower and that's our program. So I will build that in, and I do get questions from districts to explain what it is, but I'll write a letter or I'll personalize it and I'll cite the paperwork based on what they say, why I'm making this recommendation for enrollment. And then if it's not there, sometimes what we have to do is maybe we have to swap one course that's there and kind of change the funds to something that maybe can be taken later. Maybe they'll take it next year and we'll change the course to address what the child needs right now. So if they don't need, PE until next year, but that's on the contract, we'll swap PE for executive functioning, something that they need right now in this moment.
Great. That's very, very helpful. Thank you, Maggie. I mean, can you, actually, here's another question. I will skip my question. Do you have students who come part-time for some core academic support, for example, English and math, and then stay in district for science and social studies? Is that an option? And if so, has that been successful?
Yes, we have done that. We're a little bit at the mercy of the school district to approve it, but we do have great relationships with the local high schools. Typically what the process looks like is that if we're going to take over, let's say math, they want to see the scope and sequence. They want to make sure that it's still aligning with what they're teaching in the classroom. Same thing for middle school. So if they want to, typically the department heads of the subject, so math or English, want to see what we're covering and make sure it's aligned with what they're doing. Sometimes if it's gotten to a point within IEP meetings, CSE or PPT meetings, that this subject in particular needs to be taught somewhere else, we've seen it worked out, but for the most part, we do see parents just kind of taking their child out of that one class, putting them at Fusion. We see that a lot over the summer. So a student will come and take a course over the summer or repeat a course over the summer and transition that back. When a child completes a course at Fusion, they will earn an official transcript. It will have the classes, the credit, and the grade that they earned with us at Fusion. We've had students that have come every summer to take ASL or Japanese or Mandarin, and they earn a transcript. Exactly. They earn a transcript with each year, the semesters of the course that they took, and it transfers back. The homeschool doesn't always combine the transcript. It really depends on the situation that you're in and the school. Sometimes they do combine the transcript, sometimes they don't. And then when you're applying to college, you just submit them both.
Perfect. That's super, super helpful. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit, since we're kind of on that topic of, your district relationships. Can you talk a little bit about how that works with your, your outplaced kids, after they come in, what your what your level of contact is with the district, how you manage goals, IEPs, et cetera?
Sure. So because we're a state-approved non-public school and not a state-approved special education or therapeutic school, typically parents have gone through a couple of other schools on the list, right? So they're looking at the state-approved schools. They've gone back with their attorneys and said, this is not appropriate. Fusion is the appropriate place. Eventually, we get to the point where the district then agrees. So it's never a direct outplacement. So when it comes to the IEPs, the services that we can offer, we continuously take a look at it. Our special education leads hop on the CSE or PPT calls. They join, they give the progress. We also have a release from the parents. So we first work with the parents, not the district. So if the parents do not want us contacting the district, or if the district contacts us, we'll always notify them first to release information. Whereas the district will, the relationship we have with them is very much, they want to make sure that they're attending. So they want to see the attendance reports. They want to have us join those CSE or PPT calls. The relationship is very minimal outside of just giving progress reports or attendance reports.
Perfect. That's super helpful. I was going to actually ask you to highlight parent communication a little bit, because I know that's one of my favorite things about, the Fusion experience is really the email you get every day after every class about what your child did in that class, which I've never had an experience with in any other educational institution that I've been involved with. And there have been many. So if you could talk about that and how, your teachers communicate with parents and family.
Yeah, sure. So like Christine said, every class, every day that a student has, we pull an email together. It's generated. It goes out about 7 o'clock at night. And you have a write-up of how the day went for the child. So we ask our teachers to reflect on how did they show up? How, were they emotional? Were they beaming? Were they so excited? Were they a little groggy? That information is really helpful for parents that maybe are changing medications or starting to see patterns in behavior where they don't have to ask their child. They don't have to come to us. They just know to expect it. So they can see each night if they're noticing anything different, they're seeing really great things. That write-up goes right into your inbox. So again, it'll talk about anything that the teacher is seeing, how they were that day, what they're working on, how they did on their homework, and what they're working on next. So you're constantly in the loop where, you ask your child, how was school today? Fine, okay, silly, stupid, this or that. You get one-word answers, right? You don't get the details. So that's 7 o'clock. We're really intentional with sending it at 7, right around or before dinner time, so that you have a good understanding of how your child's showing up to the dinner table as well.
I always love those emails. They sometimes would start with, Spencer is bored today. And that is always super helpful, to kind of, get a sense of where your child is, but really, really thorough and helpful. Does anyone have any other questions for Maggie or for Elizabeth about Fusion, their platform, the way they serve special education students, outplacement at Fusion, Greenwich, Fairfield, Westchester? Any other questions that we might have for our guests this morning, or this afternoon, I should say? You can put them in the chat or you can ask them directly. Okay, well, it seems like we have covered the, everybody knows everything there is to know about Fusion. We're so grateful for Maggie and for Elizabeth joining us this afternoon. This presentation has been recorded, and we will be distributing a recording of that to you if you've missed this or you'd like to review portions of the presentation part of this meeting. That you'll be receiving that in a couple of days. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Elizabeth and Maggie, and have a great rest of the day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Christine.
Thanks so much. Bye.